The man who discovered gravity spent 30 years calculating the end of the world. He hid it. Not because he was afraid of being wrong. He was the most confident mind in the history of science. He hid it because he knew that what was in those notebooks would destroy everything the world believed about him. Isaac Newton, the man who wrote the laws of motion, who invented calculus, who described how the universe works with such precision that we still use his mathematics to navigate spacecraft, spent more time on alchemy and biblical prophecy than on all of his science combined. He wrote more than 1 million words on alchemy alone. Of the 10 million words Newton left behind, nearly half are about theology. The Principia, the book that changed everything, represents perhaps 5% of what he actually wrote. The rest was hidden. For 260 years. My name is Edmund Halley. I paid to publish his greatest work out of my own pocket. I was perhaps the closest thing he had to a friend. I never knew what was in those notebooks. In 1936, an economist opened a metal chest at Sotheby's in London and found them. What he read led him to write something no one expected to hear about the father of modern science. He never got to deliver it himself. He died before the day came, but his words reached Cambridge anyway. Newton was not the first of the age of reason. He was the last of the magicians. This is what he found, and this is what Newton hid. Isaac Newton was born on the 4th of January, 1643, in a stone farmhouse in Woolsthorpe, Lincolnshire. His father had died 3 months before he arrived. When Newton was 3 years old, his mother Hannah remarried a wealthy clergyman named Barnabas Smith. She moved into her new husband's house. She left her son behind. He did not see his mother properly for years. In a private notebook he kept as a young man, a list of sins itemized with the precision he applied to everything, he recorded this: threatening my father and mother Smith to burn them and the house over them. A child abandoned by his mother, an anger that never left. What saved him was a schoolmaster who saw something no one else had noticed. He wrote to Hannah and told her, "This boy should not be a farmer." She listened. Newton went to Cambridge in 1661. 4 years later, the plague came. Cambridge sent its students home. Newton returned to Woolsthorpe. He was 22 years old, alone in a farmhouse. 18 months of nothing but silence and time. What he did with those 18 months has no parallel in the history of human thought. He invented calculus, a new branch of mathematics built from nothing, that every engineer and physicist who has worked in the centuries since has depended on. He discovered that white light contains every color. He began the calculations that would become his theory of universal gravitation, the idea that a single equation governs the motion of every object in the universe, from a falling stone to the orbit of Saturn. 3 fields, 18 months, 1 man alone while the world died of plague. If you have ever sat with a problem that felt impossible and pushed through anyway, you have a faint sense of what drove him, but you do not understand the scale of what Newton did. What happened in that farmhouse is not a scientific achievement. It is something else, something for which we do not have a word. He did not publish any of it. He went back to Cambridge. As a Cambridge Fellow, he was required to take holy orders and become an ordained Anglican priest. He negotiated a personal exemption from the crown, arguing his scientific role required full dedication. Charles II granted it. A conflict with the church was quietly avoided. But here is what Newton knew that Charles II did not. Newton had concluded, in notebooks he showed to no one, that the doctrine of the Trinity was a fraud. He believed it had been inserted into Christianity 3 centuries after Christ by men with political motives. In England in the 17th century, denying the Trinity was not a theological disagreement. It was a crime. Behind his rooms at Trinity College, he had built a laboratory where he worked through the night, experimenting with metals and recording everything in a private cipher as he searched for the Philosopher's Stone. Not as a curiosity, as the most serious project of his life. Newton kept two lives: the rational scientist the world could see, and the secret magician who believed the universe was a code written by God, and that he alone had the mind to read it. You need to sit with that. The man who gave the world its laws of physics, the same laws that guided the Apollo missions and that keep satellites in orbit above your head tonight, believed his true purpose was not to describe the universe. It was to decode a message hidden inside it. In 1704, Newton was 61 years old. He had been working on the hidden code of the Bible for more than 30 years. In that year, he applied his mathematics to the prophecies of the book of Daniel. He took the prophetic periods mentioned in Daniel, the 1,260 days, and interpreted them as years. He anchored the calculation to the year 800, when the Holy Roman Empire was established under Charlemagne. He added the 1,260 years. The number he arrived at was 2060. He wrote it on a scrap of paper, next to real mathematical calculations. He wrote the period of 1,260 days, if dated from the complete conquest of the three kings, will end in the year 2060. It may end later, but I see no reason for its ending sooner. Newton calculated the end of the world, and he hid it for 30 years, not the destruction of the earth. What he envisioned for 2060 was a transformation, the fall of corrupt institutions, the end of false doctrine, the beginning of a kingdom of peace, the world remade by the same God whose code he had been reading his entire adult life. He wrote that he was making the calculation not to assert when the time of the end shall be, but to put a stop to the rash conjectures of fanciful men who brought the sacred prophecies into discredit by making predictions that failed. He was the most careful mathematician who ever lived. He was not going to be one of the fanciful men. He hid the notebook among millions of words. He told no one. Now I want to tell you about the afternoon I came to his door. In August of 1684, I came to Cambridge with a question about the orbits of planets. I had been debating the problem with Christopher Wren and Robert Hooke. Hooke claimed he had proved it. He could not produce the proof. So I went to Newton. He opened the door. He had that look he sometimes carried, the look of a man whose mind was somewhere else entirely, and who was only partly present in the room he was standing in. I had seen it before. I had learned not to take it personally. I asked him, if the force attracting a planet to the sun decreases with the square of the distance, what shape would the planet's orbit take? He said, an ellipse. Just like that. No hesitation. No working it through. I asked how he knew. He said he had proved it years ago. He could not find the paper. He would redo the proof and send it to London. I walked back to my horse, feeling something I could not quite name. Not admiration exactly. Something closer to vertigo. The question that had kept three of us arguing for months, that I had failed to solve, that Hooke had claimed to solve but could not prove. Newton had answered it in 3 seconds, from memory, as if I had asked him what day of the week it was. 3 months later, a 9-page manuscript arrived. I read it in one sitting. Then I traveled back to Cambridge immediately, because what Newton had sent me was not just a proof about orbits. It was the beginning of a complete description of how the universe works. Every force, every motion, every orbit, all of it, derived from 3 laws and a single equation. I knew what I was holding, and I knew that Newton had kept this in a drawer for years. He had solved the shape of planetary orbits, proved it, and said nothing. To publish the mathematics meant opening the door to the other notebooks, and the other notebooks had to stay hidden. What you need to understand is what it cost him to publish it all. Every page of the Principia was a calculated risk. Every equation exposed him a little more. The man who wanted to keep both lives intact had to choose, and he chose reluctantly, because I would not stop pushing. I spent 2.5 years getting it done. I edited the manuscript. I corrected the proofs. I paid the printing costs out of my own pocket. I subdued a priority dispute with Hooke that would have ended the whole project. In 1687, the Principia came off the press, the most important scientific book ever written. Newton was 44 years old, and within weeks of publication, he was back in his laboratory. He became warden of the Royal Mint in 1696, then master in 1699. He hunted counterfeiters across London with the same total focus he had once brought to the laws of gravity, and he had one notorious forger hanged and publicly disemboweled. He became president of the Royal Society in 1703. He was knighted in 1705, and in the private hours, the notebook stayed hidden. Newton died on the 31st of March, 1727. He left no will. His papers passed through the family of the Earl of Portsmouth, carefully kept and little read, for 2 centuries. In 1872, Cambridge University acquired the collection. Scholars spent 16 years cataloging the contents and kept what they considered scientifically significant. They returned the rest to the family: the theological papers, the alchemical papers, the private calculations. In 1936, the family needed money. The papers went to Sotheby's. On a Tuesday afternoon in July, the bulk of Newton's private writings went under the hammer. The entire collection sold for £9,000. The economist John Maynard Keynes tracked down the papers afterward, buying them back piecemeal from the dealers. He read through everything Newton had hidden. What he found stopped him. Keynes died in April 1946, 3 months before the Newton tercentenary celebrations at Cambridge. His essay was read aloud in his place by his brother. The words were his own. Newton was not the first of the age of reason. He was the last of the magicians. He looked on the whole universe, and all that was in it, as a riddle, as a secret, which could be read by applying pure thought to certain mystic clues which God had laid about the world. He spent 30 years on it. He calculated a date. He hid it in a notebook among millions of words, on a scrap of paper next to real mathematics, and he did not tell a single person. The notebook sat in a box in Jerusalem until 1969, 265 years after Newton wrote it. In August of 1684, I knocked on a door in Cambridge and asked a distracted man a question about planetary orbits. He gave me the answer in 3 seconds. I walked away feeling smaller than I had before I arrived. He spent 30 years on the other question, and he never told me. If you look up at the night sky tonight and see a satellite crossing the darkness, the mathematics keeping it in orbit is Newton's. It has not needed to change in 300 years. The notebook is still in Jerusalem. He kept both lives until the end. Only one of them was supposed to be found.